music. I have Zoom muted, so we should be good. Yeah. I'm just using a thing called Lo-Fi Hip Hop Mix 2021. No copyright from YouTube. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream today. This is kind of something we just threw together last minute because we didn't have anything planned for today, and I thought I was going to be gone. But then we decided, hey, let's just do a demo about all the stuff we use for Animbot. So we're going to
Yeah,
demo that.
because
Hopefully, it'll be helpful for you guys. And what were you going to say?
not everyone wants to hear more about Animbot. Every time
Yeah,
that we talk about it, everyone's like, oh, show us the tools. So
yeah,
here there are. If anyone has any questions about Animbot or anything, basically just type it in the chat.
yeah. And any specific tools you want us to look at. I'd say I've probably played around with almost every tool in Animbot, but there may be some that I haven't or some that I just don't use. So we're only going to go over the ones that we find the most useful for animators, but there may be some that you use a lot that we don't go over. And if you want to message that in the chat or whatever, we can talk about that. And also, thank you. I've been playing it since it came out, and it's super, super fun. So, really proud of the whole team. They put in a lot of effort, and the cinematics look so cool. Not
It
that
looks
I'm
amazing.
biased or anything, but also forgive the green screen in the back, but I literally showed up wearing a green shirt, not thinking about the fact that I have a green screen and have to key it out. So I was like, you know, I'll just leave it black. So hopefully it's not distracting having a big green screen behind
Uh,
me.
you are way more professional than I am. I just have my room
Okay.
as a background.
Well, I just have a bunch of like stuff behind here, so I have to use it to hide it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me switch over to Maya. Cool. So to start off, just one of the more simple, or I guess we'll start from the very left and we'll just wake our way to the right. So I'll start off first with hotkeys, because that's the very left. So the hotkeys I find the most useful for me are nudge left and nudge right. I'm just going to start from the top to the bottom. So what nudge left and nudge right do is if I create a cube here, and let's just say I've got animation, so frame 1, frame 70 over here. So I just have this animation from frame 1 to frame 70, right? And I'm like, this is way too slow, right? This needs to be half the speed. I can move my cursor to 35. I hit Alt 1. Boom, it snaps my key over to frame 35. And now I have faster animation. And I'm like, you know what? I want the cube to hold a little bit before it starts moving. I move my cursor to frame 10. I hit Alt 2, which is nudge right, and boom, it snaps my key over to frame 10. So it's a really fast and easy and quick way to retime your animation, and it can also do one frame at a time. So if I'm at 35 and my key's on 35, I hold Alt 2 and I can nudge the key as far right, and then I hit Alt 1 and it'll move it left. So rather than shift clicking and moving like this, or going in the graph editor, which a lot of times, unfortunately, Maya does not show all the keys in the graph editor 100% of the time. So there's times when I go into the graph editor and I select the keys and I move them over, and there's still a red tick mark here because there's something in here that just Maya decided not to select. So for me, this is by far the easiest way because not only can I move it one frame at a time, I can go to the frame that I want to and snap it over there, which is super, super handy and time saving, especially when you're in blocking. And yes, I can go into X-form relationships because I use that a lot. So that's the first one I use. Going down here, there's a lot of really helpful things in here. Some of them I don't use. Like there's one that a lot of people use that is axis orientation toggle, which I know a lot of animators use, which basically you can set it to a button and it'll flip between object, world, and gimbal. So for rotation, world space rotation, object space, or gimbal rotation, right?
That sounds very useful, but I
Yeah,
feel like I will forget in which mode I am if I don't
yeah.
see it visually.
Yeah.
That's just me being dumb. But I
Well,
I I have like there's a sense of security in being like, no, now I want game.
yeah. And that's the reason for me is like I know so many animators who double click this and they flip it here, which takes so long. I think it was Vicky Hauser is the one that taught me to hold down W and left click and flip it this way. Ever since
Mm,
then, I can do this just as quickly as I can hit a hotkey and toggle through. So for
yeah,
me, it would just be breaking a habit and learning a new habit to toggle through, and I feel like it would be fast. It would be longer because I'd having to be like, okay, is this object? Is this world? Is this gimbal? And like flipping through, not knowing which one was which. And for me,
yeah.
this is just as quick, if not quicker. So I use this version, but I know a lot of animators who do use the toggle.
Yeah.
Um,
I think not just that, but like Pratham was asking if both of our studios allow Animbot. Mine
yes.
does. I'm not sure about yours. Yeah, cool. But what if there's a studio who can't afford to give you Animbot and you don't have your own license and you can't install it?
Yeah.
If you depend too much on those hotkeys, then you can't remember what the actual Maya hotkeys are because that menu that you showed from Maya is a hotkey.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's some where I'm like, I'd rather just keep with the
Yeah.
hotkeys that I know, just in case.
Yeah. And as it goes for most studios now, like Animbot has been really, really good about designing its program in a way that any studio can use it. Meaning like from for the studio I'm working at right now, Day for Night, I'm working on a remote computer that does not have internet access at all. Like I cannot get on the internet with that computer because it's so NDA and all that. So beforehand they wouldn't allow any plugins because they don't know what the code is. You can't verify it. You have to be in the internet to make sure it's bought, whatever. The way Animbot is set up, I talked to my supervisor. They were like, yes, we downloaded Animbot. We brought it onto all the machines so you can install it. And if you want to purchase a license for it, you can. And the way that you verify it is you hit validate without internet, and it'll pop up a QR code. You take your phone, you scan the QR code, it'll give you a list of numbers. You put that numbers on your remote workstation, and it'll verify it with no internet connection. And so that right there is I think the main reason why almost every studio that I know of allows or encourages Animbot because they know it's safe and they can do it on any computer even if it doesn't have internet connection. And
Yeah,
so,
the only problem is like again for in my case both studios that I worked on
mm-hmm,
didn't allow any installations from anything unless it was pre-approved.
mm-hmm,
And for us to get Animbot, we had to fight for it to get
yep,
it. It's like, please, we need it.
yeah,
And now, for example, where I'm at, they have a certain number of licenses. So sometimes if too many people are using it, sometimes it's not
mm-hmm,
just animators, but I don't know, layout or any other departments. If too many people are using it, maybe you end up losing your license.
yep,
So that's why, like, it's annoying, but it's like I love Animbot, but I know also I don't have to depend all the time on it because sometimes it's just not there,
yeah,
which is like,
yeah,
yeah,
agreed. And everything I do in Animbot, I do know how to do in Maya. It just takes me 3 times as long.
yeah,
And
exactly,
so
yeah,
even the X form stuff I can do without my Animbot, but it'll just take me way, way, way longer.
yeah,
And
or the motion trails,
or yeah, the motion trails and stuff like that. And
yeah.
like uh, display toggle display NURBS and toggle display geometry. For anybody that's used Maya for very long, you probably notice that anytime you open up, your windows sometime get reset, and everything is showed in here. So for me, the biggest reason I have this is because I want my geometry and I want my NURBS curves. So I open up a scene, I immediately undock this, hit none, uncheck these for my shot cam viewport, and then I hit 6 and 7, and it immediately displays my NURBS and my geometry. Other times, if I'm in there and I'm micro adjusting things and the geometry's in the way and I want to get to a control, I turn off my geometry, I select my NURBS curves, and I turn it back on. So it almost, it gives me a lot of freedom to like just hit a button and turn on and off my geometry without having to open this up and click buttons.
Yeah. Someone is asking, I'm not really sure about this, if there's a way to switch between cameras from Animbot. I honestly don't know. Not sure if you
Yeah,
do.
don't. I think I've seen something. Play Blast visibility mode. I know that is like, I know like somewhere, which I know it was in beta and it didn't really work very well when it first came out. I haven't used it since then, but there's a setting you can use that you set what camera it's going to play blast from no matter what view you're in. I don't know about toggling
Mm.
camera visibility. I'd have to check into that, but I haven't used anything like that. Typically, if I want to switch camera modes, I animate in a 2-panel layout where I have my shot cam. So I have my shot cam and my perspective, and I typically have my shot cam locked. And if I ever just want one, I just hit the space bar. So I'll work in perspective, hit space bar, and I'm in my shot cam.
Yeah, another way that I do it, because I usually never have two cameras in the same screen. I have one camera in one screen and my perspective in another.
Mm-hmm.
But if I want to switch it, I literally just go to the outliner, click on the camera, and drag it to the viewport that I want it in, and it just drops it there. So that's the way that I do it.
So you like middle mouse or left click?
I think middle mouse. I'm not sure because I do it. You know when
Okay,
you
that
do it so
works.
much by
Yeah,
memory? Yeah. Yeah.
that's cool. I didn't
I
even know
just
that was
do that.
possible.
Yeah. I
That's
don't even
actually
know
kind of
how I
handy.
discovered it. Probably by accident.
Yeah,
One
that's
day
kind of
I
handy.
dragged something. I was like, oh my god. Oh, okay, it's there.
Yeah, so that's actually super useful. Also, for anyone that always has issues of clipping, you can easily go in to your near clip plane, set that to 10, and that'll fix that problem. Something that I think a lot of people don't realize, but is super simple fix. But
Yeah.
continuing on with the hotkeys, what else do I have? Smart next frame, smart next keyframe. Cool, that's the next one. So this one is a super handy one. It's basically the same thing that you can do in Maya of you can set a hotkey that will skip keys, and you can set a hotkey that will go frame to frame. So if I hit, for me it's 1 and 2 can go right, one goes left, 2 goes right, and then 3 keys through left, 4 keys through right. So those are just my personal hotkeys, but Maya has the exact same thing. The only difference between that and what Animbot has is if you try to frame through or key through and you have audio in your scene, you won't be scrubbing through that audio. It'll just be silent. With Animbot, you can scrub audio just by hitting this hotkey. So if I'm wanting to really hear some phonemes in this little section, I'm like, what mouth shape? And I can just frame through like this, and I can hear what phonemes I want. Or I can actually key through as well and kind of hear my phone. So if I have, like, let's say these 4 keys are 4 phonemes, and I want to key through and make sure that those phonemes are hitting with the sound that I hear, I can skip through like that. And then the other benefit to these, I just realized that I turned off manipulators and selection highlighting. The other benefit to this is you can select what you want to key through, which is the biggest thing for me. So let's say I'm going through and I'm blocking, and I have blocked in my key poses and I blocked in a couple breakdowns, but I want to frame through and feel how my key poses are reading. I can go in the graph editor and I can select my key poses, and I can leave my breakdowns. Let's say theoretically that these 2 keys are my breakdowns and these are my keys. I can set these, and it'll only key through the keys that I selected in the graph editor. So because I didn't select this key here or this key, it skips over it, which is so handy because it also helps of, like, let's say this section of my animation is like a guy like punching something, and I've already done this section of my animation and it feels pretty good. Rather than having to like set my gate to what I want it to, I can just select these in the outliner and I can just see this motion. And I'm like, okay, this needs to arc a little bit, right? And I go here and I'm like, okay, here we go. Oh, that reads much better now. And so then that I get that fixed, then I can just select all of it and be like, okay, this works good now. Boom. And so it's super handy, allowing you the ability to control what you frame through, what you don't. And
And don't have that set up. I'm definitely setting that up when I get to work because that sounds so
Yeah,
useful.
it is very, very, very useful. So aside from that, if you do, I don't know if you have any hotkeys that you use, but that's everything that I use in terms of hotkeys.
No,
So
not really, because I was very lazy and I didn't set them up.
and so if we're going over just to this one, I slightly use this sometimes. Typically, the only time I ever use this is if I'm using an IK wrist and I have like an arc and it's a really messy arc and I have bad gimbal and I'm just like trying to clean up the rotational arc on something. And we all know if we're trying to clean up, like typically the way I clean up rotational arcs is, let's say, let me just duplicate this, shrink it down. Let's say this is a hand. And I'll just combine this, modify, mesh, combine. There we go. So this is a hand, and I have this IK hand going around and doing things. There we go. The hand, this is an IK hand, right? And it's going around and doing things. So I can go into Animbot's motion trail, and I can do, let's go ahead and just make this a quicker action so the motion trail shows more. There we go. So I have this motion trail, right? I can track the translation of the hand through this motion trail, but what about the rotation? Because a lot of times you move an IK hand, but the rotation is popping around. So you can have a perfect arc here, but your rotation is terrible and it pops around all the time, especially if you have gimbal lock, which happens all the time with IK hands, which is why I hate IK hands. But the cool thing about Animbot, which is one tool to show another tool, which I wasn't planning to get into motion trails yet, but I can offset the motion trail to track this point that is controlled by the hand. So if I want to see the rotations of the hand, I can offset the motion trail, and now if I rotate, it's changing the arc of the hand. So now I can see what the tip of the fingers are doing. And so sometimes if you're getting this far out to get those perfect arcs in the rotation of the hand, you move it just slightly and the arc just moves way off into infinity. And so that's the only time that I use this control here, because it allows you to move it slightly. So if I have gimbal lock through this section, right? Let's just pretend that I have really messy arc right here. And I want to clean this up, right? And so I'm like, So I try to move it and I'm like inching it, trying to get this nice arc, and it's not moving the way I want. Most of the time what I'll do is I'm like, okay, it needs to move up in RZ. I'll select RZ, I have the 1/10, and I'll just start hitting plus. And I'm like, okay, that is not moving enough for me. Maybe I'll do 0.1. And so I'll start moving it up by 0.1. You can see it's moving up slightly, and I can easily control. So I'm like, okay, that's a little, let's do 0.3. And I'll just slowly pull it up. That way I'm not trying to like micro move it and overshoot and not know where I'm going, if that makes sense. Like, it's not the most life altering, saving a lot of time, but it's just kind of like a quality of life thing. It just makes life a little bit easier using this thingy. But again, like I said, I rarely use it because most of the time I fix my gimbal lock issues with the other tools we'll go into later. But sometimes if I have to hardball something, it's a nice easy way to do it.
Just a thing that I just remembered for anyone who was looking at the hotkeys, you can basically have hotkeys for absolutely everything in Animbot, even the sliders.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't use it, but if anyone is interested, just go over the hotkeys menu because you can hotkey anything.
Yeah. And there is one thing that I've always wanted to try if I ever had the money. There's these cool Bluetooth things that have a rotational slider that is a hotkey for your computer. I've always wanted to buy one of those and set that up for like the ease tool so that I can be animating and I just grab that little rotational slider and I can see my animation move while I'm rotating this super satisfying because they have like these little clicky noises when you rotate it and seeing the
Oh,
slider move when I rotate that it's like it's a dream, like a dream of
that
mine.
sounds awesome.
I would love to do that one day, but those things are kind of expensive, so I've never bought it, but
Yeah.
I would
It's
love.
okay when we're rich and famous as animators.
Yeah.
Sure.
This is also a handy thing that I'm just going over because I just remembered it. I don't know if I've even told you about this, Sin, but it's not Animbot, but it is a hotkey, plugin hotkey that I can share for anyone who wants it. Let me just pull in a rig real quick. Rigs. I guess I'll just use.
Is it a plugin that you got somewhere?
Yeah, it's a script. I think it's from Aaron Carousel, if you know who that is.
Mm. Yeah.
Let me just.
Also, we can see your menu on the other screens, so move them off.
Oh, whoops. Let me move it to the other screen. Shot 2. Here we go. I can probably show the Animbot stuff better through a shot that's animated anyway, as opposed to using a cube, so I might as well open this up.
Yeah, he has a lot of cool tools. I've been meaning to download some, but I feel like with Animbot, I have so many that I even haven't gone through that I need to just like take a full day to be like, okay,
Yeah.
what does this do? How is this going to help me?
This one I actually found from one of my coworkers at work. He was like, I need this hotkey. I was like, why? And it doesn't sound that cool. But then he started like trying to get it to work and he was asking me to help him get it to work. And by the time I got it to work for him, I was like, I need this right now. And so if you can see, I already have a lot of animation on this chest. But I'm like, okay, what if I want to make him more hunched over? I could go into the graph editor and I could start grabbing entire curves and moving it. But what I can do with this script is I can hold down the letter, I think it's the letter P. Let me check. I have it
know
as the
which
letter P.
script you're talking about. I have the same
Yeah.
one. It's I think Animbot has a similar feature somewhere too.
I have it as the letter P at work. I just want to make sure that I have it as the same thing here. Okay, yes, I did change it. Good thing I realized. Okay, so I can hold down the hotkey. I can move his chest. I can release the hotkey. And now my animation is still intact, but it's moved to where I have it. So let's say I like what his head is doing, right? But I'm like, you know what? It would be nice if he was looking a little higher overall. So what it does is if you can see my auto key, when I hold it down, it turns auto key off. So it finds out where I place his head, right? And then whenever I release it, it makes all the animation that I had match this pose. So I can literally hold it down, move the head to where I want it, and now all my animation is still there. So in essence, it's almost like an animation layer, right? I can select it, add it to an animation layer, move it. But the problem with animation layers is once you have it on animation layers, you have to bake it down at some point, unless you want to have animation layers for the rest of your life, which most of the time you don't. So this does it with only the keys that you have, and it's life changing. I will find it. It's an Aaron Carousel script. I'll have to go
I'm trying
find
to
it.
find
Yeah.
the name of the script. This is
It's
here are all the I don't know if the links working?
I think they are.
I hope they are.
I
If
believe it's
that link
curve
didn't work, let me
offset
know.
tool or something it's something called like curve offset tool or something like that. But for Ayub asking, What version do you need to buy? For most people, I would say the Eco is ample for what you need and it's the cheapest. For me, I use the Pro because I had two computers and I believe the Pro has, if you're the same person, you can have it on two different computers. So I would switch between my laptop and my desktop a lot. Because I had the Pro, I was able to use.
No, Eco does the same thing
Oh,
because I
Eco
used to
does?
have that one. But what I would say that the bad thing about that version, which is why I don't have it anymore,
Mm.
is that the updates are so infrequent
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes the Pro version is, I don't know, on version 20 and you're still in version 5 and it's
Yeah.
been 2 years. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say if you're gonna use it all the time, um, and you don't, you have the money,
Mm-hmm.
buying the Pro has its perks.
Yeah.
But honestly, the Eco one, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can use it. Like the only problem is this, if there's a lot of bugs or if there's new tools, you're not gonna get a new release for at
Yeah.
least a year.
Yeah. Which, like, so if you can see on the Animbot ongoing right now, it's 2.23. I believe the Eco only gets updates on the first number. So you have like two. So it was like the first Animbot, which is 1.00. And then there's I believe the third number is just bug fixes. The second number is new features. But all these have to get to 10 before this one moves up to 2. And so you only get an update every year or so. Which, if
Yeah.
you have a version of Animbot that you enjoy and is stable, you can buy the Eco with that version and you don't ever have to update, which is a benefit sometimes. Like, I
Yeah.
have the Pro here, like this is a Pro and I get updates all the time. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're really like enthusiastic about them. But for work, I wanted to save money, so I bought the Eco version because I knew I already had that version, the Pro, like here, this one. I knew all these tools were in the Eco and they were all super stable, so I bought that. And I don't feel the need to have to update for a long time unless they just have something amazing that comes out. But if I
Yeah.
had bought the Eco whenever it was in 1.00 and it was super unstable, I'd be unhappy with it until they had a batch update that was stable. Right now, we're in a good version of update of
Yeah, that's what
Animbot where
happened
it's
to me.
stable. Yeah.
I bought it as soon as it came out.
Yeah.
Instant regret.
So the other benefit of having the Pro is you're able to get into the Facebook group with Alan himself. And if you have any technical issues or anything like that, you can literally post in the group and he responds within a couple hours. And he typically has super informed solutions. And if he doesn't, he'll like, you know, send it to the other coders he has working for him and stuff like that to get the issue fixed. So it's really kind of nice to have that Facebook group that you can talk to him directly because he's the one that made it. So that's kind of my opinion. Is like Pro is nice, but it's not life changing enough that you have to have it over the Eco if you
Yeah,
have a good solid version on the Eco version. But
I agree.
let's see. So I guess we can move on to
And the green sliders.
yes. So I guess we can start off with the ease tool. I love the ease tool a lot. In simple terms, what the ease tool does, if you have a key
Saves your
here,
life.
if you have a key here, which is the rotate X, and you have a key here, if I go here, I can choose to ease between this key and this key. And hold on, my graph editor's doing that bug again. Let me open it back up. Also, in case anybody uses my 2019 like I do, there's a bug where if you do anything in the graph editor, it resets your selection. So if I'm in RY and I delete a key, it'll reset back to here. And so what you have to do is you just undock your graph editor, hit exit, open it back up, and it'll fix that issue. But I docked this in the wrong tab. There we go. So in simple form,
I was looking, I was like, are you sure that's the where you want to?
I
I was
always
like,
forget.
okay,
I'm like,
fine.
is it above or below? And then I do below, and I'm like, no, it was above. But in simple terms, the ease tool works like this. You can ease between the key before, the key after. And if you have your overshoots turned on, which I use a lot, you can overshoot it to be above. Same with the tween key. You can overshoot above, overshoot below, which is very handy at times. The nice thing about the ease key, which is different than the tween, is if I want, I can select 3 keys and make them ease, right? So if I have a messy graph editor and it looks like this, and I'm like, I just want his head to go like this, right? So I know in RX it's gonna ease down because he's not gonna go like boing, right? It's not gonna do that. So I can select these keys and just say, Animbot, animate for me. Boom, eased. Perfect. Same with like RY. I don't want him to overshoot and settle because it looks like this. And I'm like, you know what? Animbot, ease. And now it eases in, right? Super, super, super handy because then it does multiple keys at once, which is very, very nice.
Yeah.
So,
and as with everything, these tools are just basically to give you a start base, but then just go and tweak it to whatever you want, because it's never exactly what your animation needs, but it takes you 95% of the way there.
When your graph header does this, leave town.
Doing that, wait, do you have, because sometimes I have that, but it's also like the results are turned on for some reason. But that one is doing some weird
when
dark
Animbot
magic.
does this, pack your bags and leave town.
Maya 2019. And I bet there's still problems in the new one.
Okay, let me just reopen this shot. Also, I need to go through and remove all the student license things from my Maya because having a student Maya, you learn to deal with those stupid boxes, but now that I have a professional version of Maya, it just gets so tiring having to click that stupid student license thing.
Yeah. But the only thing, I don't know if it happened to you when you first started with the work version of Maya.
You
that
open
I was
it up?
so used to. No, I was so used to Maya letting me know when I was saving.
Yep.
That it was like a reminder.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can go 2 hours without saving. I have auto-saved turned on, but I can go hours without actually saving, and suddenly it freezes. I'm like, oh my god!
Yep.
I haven't saved in 2 hours. With the other one, it was like, oh, like if I saved, it's like a pop-up. It's like, oh yeah, I remember I need to do. So like the annoyance helped me. Now I'm like, who cares?
Yep. Yeah, it's the same for me because you save and you're like, did I save? Did it actually save? I don't know. I didn't get the thing. But I guess the next key, the next tool that I use sometimes is like, let's say he goes down like this and he's like about to pull the knife out and he's like high tension, like he's shaking a little bit. In Animbot, what you can do, I'm just going to show this on one curve. I can go through and key this. And let's say I want him to be shaky. So I can select these keys, I can hit noise wave, and it's just going to create shaking, right? Right. So now I have a nice little shake on my animation where he's like, and he like pulls it out. So like it's super easy, you can do it yourself, but it's just, again, it's a time saver. Noise wave, time offset, never really used it. Sometimes it's nice to have if you're like in blocking and you don't want to offset keys. What it'll do is it'll offset your curve without moving your keys. So it works a little better when you have more dense keyframes. Maybe here? No, that's not. I don't have a lot of keyframes anywhere. I'm very keyframe conscious, but I guess this might be a good place to show. If I wanted to offset this curve here to be later, I can do the time offset and it'll just move the keyframes to offset that curve. So, again, I've never really found it super useful, but sometimes it works. Push pull. Sin, if you want to go into a little more of what you use this for.
I use it, basically it's like the lazy way of scaling your keys up and down. It kind of maintains, like if you select, usually all of the sliders, the green sliders are used with more than one key, exactly. It kind of scales it relative to like the middle of your curve, wherever your keys are. And it's just an easy way of maintaining without, like, because sometimes scale just scales everything up, but without taking into account where the keys are coming from. So this version just makes it cleaner. And sometimes, like, whenever like you get a note from your lead say, hey, I think that head shake is a little bit too big. Can you tone it down? Sure. I grab the keys, push, pull down, done. It took me no time.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah. And that's
So
kind of the same as this tool here, SLSR. It's just slightly different and nuanced in its the way you use it. So for example, if I got a note from my lead that's like, okay, he's pulling the knife out, the motion feels good, but it needs to come out farther, right? It needs to come out way, way farther, or way, way less. It needs to come out like this, right? I like the motion, but how am I going to make it come out less, because some of these curves are going up, some are going down. I know that this frame is good because this is the last frame before it comes out. So I'm going to select everything after it, and it's going to scale relative to this key, which is the last good key I have. So I can hit SL, and it's going to scale my animation out comparatively to this. But it's also scaling out the rotations too, because he rotates out a little bit. So if I just want translations, because it just needs to come out farther, I can select these, and it'll scale it relative to the first key. And the same with the right key. If, let's say, where's a good spot? Let's say I want to scale this relative to this key because I like this key for some reason. I can select this, and I can hit scale right, and everything is scaling based off the key to the right, or everything can scale relative to this key to the left. So it's a nice way to scale your animation based off of a pose you have, which is very, very helpful. So.
yeah.
And then sometimes I use Smart Bake. Usually I don't find it the best, but what it does essentially is it'll bake your keys down on a slider. Where is it? Oh, here we go. It'll use auto tangents to keep the curve intact while deleting keys, which.
But it's behind our video camera, so we can't see. Can you shift the timeline?
Oh, here we go. There we go. Yeah, basically you can select a section and you're like, this has too many keys, but I want to keep the curve. It'll automatically rotate your curves to like try to keep the curve the same. It'll rotate your tangents to try to keep the curve the same while deleting keys, which I find it about like 70% accurate most of the time. I'd rather just do it myself because I feel like I'd be more nuanced, and it's kind of...
Maya has a similar one in the graph editor. I think it's more of, if let's say you get an animation from someone else and the graph editor is a mess and you want to the simplify curves. It's like, yeah, you can do that, and then you go and clean it up yourself.
Yeah. I've used it before if I like bake down animation layers and it's just a key on every frame. It works, but again, I'd rather do it myself because I want to decide what to simplify and not, because even if Animbot's good at preserving the curve, maybe I don't want that part of the curve preserved. Maybe there's a hitch there and it keeps it intact because it was there, but I don't want it. So like, I'd rather just do it personally myself. But
yeah,
as tween is concerned, I use this a lot. Like I actually used it for this section here. Let's see, where did I? essentially whenever I animated this, I had this key and this key of like, he pulls it out of his neck, right? But whenever you pull it, I wanted it to overshoot, like boom, right? And it goes like there and back, boom. So what I did was once I got this key and this key, which are my two key poses, I went to the middle here and I just clicked this button to where it overshoots, which I can do myself, but sometimes I might move it too high, too low, and I like to have very clean graph editor. So I'm like, oh, that looks pretty good. But it's a little too much, so maybe I'm going to tone it down just a little bit, like that. There we go. And then I'm going to try to like ease it just a little bit here so that it starts to come out slow and then bam, hits. So like I like the overshoot. I believe you can go, where is it? Is it in here? Yes, there it is. This thing. You can turn on and off your overshoots. So I right here, Pratham, this little button. You can turn it on or off, which is handy. I didn't know about that till Madison told me like 3 weeks ago, and
Yeah,
ever
it
since
used
then
to
I've
be
used it.
different because I remember being able to turn it on and off from the tool itself. I personally don't use the overshoots because the way that I block is different. But what I really like about this Twin Machine, that like earlier versions of Twin Machine from other people who scripted them were very annoying because you had like a lot of sliders for this for different things. Everything was separate. With this one, the way that I usually block is I have my first key pose, my second key pose, and I want to do one in the middle. Instead of selecting the whole pose and being like, oh, everything is going to be, I don't know, 90% of the next pose. I'm like, yeah, maybe the hips, but not the whole, maybe the RY on the hips, I want it to be 40. So I just select the rotation Y on the hips, and I do that with Twin Machine. And I basically I build my pose with Twin Machine, and then I adjust it, of course, to what I actually want from the pose. But I get really quickly all the way there by just clicking on Twin Machine on both the controls and the different channels.
Yep.
And attributes.
Yeah. For example, like, I can select the head, I can select RZ, and I can tween my RZ. Or I can select on the Y, and I can tween my RY. So it's very nice for just isolating and tweening what you need.
Yeah. We love that Twin Machine. It's the best thing.
Yeah. To be fair,
Do
I
you
don't
use any
use.
of those?
No, I don't really use any of these. Like, I'm sure there's a use for them somewhere, but until I find a use where I'm like, I really need to do this thing, I
Yeah.
probably won't ever look into what those do because, like, I haven't needed it yet. So,
Yeah, for me, whenever I use a new tool on Animbot, it's because I'm struggling with someone says something, and someone tells me, hey, Animbot does that.
yeah,
But if not, I don't go and look for it because I'm not struggling with it.
yeah. And so the next thing that I really use, I don't typically use this very much, except for Xform. Sometimes Xform bakes my keys green, which they're called like in between keys, and I do not like them at all because they move by themselves.
I hate them.
So if I ever get like these kind of keys, this yellow one, I'll just select this and hit the red button just to put all my keys as normal, good old red Maya keys. I don't play with any of these things because I don't like them. So
Yeah.
it's just a quick thing. The next thing that I use a lot is selection sets. Obviously, you can make selection sets the same way like a lot of these scripts are made by selecting in the command line. Where is it? It's on the right here. Command line. So if I select a control here, here we go. Select R memnon, da 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 da. I can middle mouse that to my shelf. That's long, painful process that takes so very long,
And
and it
editing
messes
it
up.
takes
Yes.
time.
But the way I do it, which is the simple way, Animbot is perfectly fine. You select the controls that you want, you hit the plus button, and then you name it. So I have iMask so that I can key, edit, retime my iMask, and then I have mouth. So I am a very eye mask heavy animator when it comes to the face, so I key out my main poses of the whole face. When there's no lip sync, when there is lip sync, I just do pose out the eye mask. And then I animate my in betweens for the eye mask of squashing in and out and making it super, super fleshy. My mouth is totally different because you're doing lip sync. You're going to have a crap ton of keys like I have here. The eye mask, I don't want all those keys. I want sections where there's hardly any keys at all and where I can offset and do all those things. So if I'm blocking, I'm only going to be keying when I need to on the eye mask. When I'm doing the mouth, I'm only keying what I need, and I'm keeping those very, very, very separate. And so it's very nice to have these two because you never want to have to go in and select all of this every
Yeah.
single time because it is so time consuming. And even in a picker,
And even if you're like an OCD person like me, you can set colors for everything. So let's say you have 3 characters in a shot, and I do the same thing of like eye mask, mouth, and blah blah blah. Instead of having all of them purple, for one character everything could be red. For another, everything could be green or whatever. And so it's visually very easy. And we were saying, let's say you forgot to add a control, you can just select and add a control to the selection set. So it's super, super easy.
Yep.
And it saves, so when you open Maya again, in that shot, it's per shot, it will have your selection set, which is super nice.
And if I'm not mistaken, you can see it. Animbot, here we go. Animbot select set. So you could even theoretically, if you wanted to, export these out. I believe there's an export. Right click. Export. You can export these selection sets out and import them in. So if you have another shot with this same character, import them into your next shot. You don't have to recreate them. So super handy, especially if you're in a production. You can have a lead or whoever make selection sets for every single character. That's what we did on Kana. And anytime I opened a shot, I was like, oh, shoot. Oh, wait. I can import these. I hit the import button. Every character I had has selection sets already made out, and it saves me so much time. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I never really used the copy paste animation. I've tried it before. It works, but again, there's not really. I'd rather just use post library, save my animation out, and paste it on a new rig because it's a lot simpler. Mirror works really well. I can try it here. It may not work because I didn't set a start pose. But if I select
I always forget to set the start pose.
Let's just try to mirror. And yeah, it didn't work. So basically the way that, it almost worked. It just didn't quite work because what you need to do is you need to have your character in default before you do it. Select every control, right click this, and hit snapshot mirror settings. Once you do that, it says, okay, this is default, and it mirrors everything relative to that. And so it works really, really, really well. Xform I love a lot. I use Xform all the time. People use it for constraint systems. I don't really use it that much because I like constraint systems. Because, for example, here, when he grabs the knife, I could just Xform it, but every time I change the hand, I have to re-Xform it back. Because what Xform does is if I create just a cylinder here. Thank you for the follow. I cannot see the name, but thank you for the follow. Thank you so much.
Is it still doing the Windows notifications?
I was like, oh shoot, Maya crashed.
You want to give us heart attacks, all of us. Even people watching are like, oh my god, what just happened?
If anybody was animating while watching this stream, you're welcome.
It's so that we keep you on your toes.
Yeah, it makes you be like, oh, yeah, I literally saved your life by making you save just now because you thought Maya crashed. So, you're welcome. But the way Xform works is if I have this cylinder and I want it to follow the hand, I can hit cylinder first, arm wrist control second, and I hit copy. I always slide this out. You can just right click and hit copy X form relationship, whatever. I prefer just opening it up and having copy and paste. So I copy here. In simple form, I can just hit paste, boom. It matches perfectly. You know, wherever I want to paste it, it'll match it perfectly. You can also bake all keys. So every key that I have set on either the cylinder or the wrist, it will bake it to that. So now, there you go. Looks like I'm having Euler issues on the cylinder.
God.
There we go. But you can see at times curves interpolate differently, even with bake all keys. So sometimes you have to select cube or cylinder, wrist, and bake frames. And it'll bake every single frame so that it works just like a constraint almost and matches perfectly.
Wait,
Now,
but how do you use it that's different from that?
so the way that I use it, so like you can do this for constraints, which works. I don't like it because then if I change the animation here, now I have to rebake everything. And I'd rather just have a constraint set up that works fine.
Yeah, me
What
too.
what I use all the time for animation, the X form, is baking things to cubes, baking things to locators so that I get animation for free. So, for example, I was animating a shot with a dog, and it's a little corgi, and the controls were just the worst to animate with because it didn't really have an IK hips, IK chest. It did, but it didn't work super well. So what I did was I blocked out my key poses with the dog, and then I baked the hips to a cube, I baked the chest to a cube, and I baked the head to a cube. So they're each individual controls, and then I went in and animated them like it's a proxy puppy, right? Because then I have pure IK on the hips. If I move the hips, the chest doesn't move, which is kind of what you want with a quadruped. The other nice thing is because it's in world space, let's say you have a dog that has FK hips, right? If you offset the head, it's only going to offset rotation, not translation. So what if I want the head to start moving this way and then the chest to lead? If it's just a cube in world space, I can offset it 2 frames back and the head's going to start to move, then the chest, then the hips.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that with an FK spine. So then I went and did that. I animated it. I got the energy really, really nice. And then I just went into X form, selected the control first, then the cube, which it already matched up because I blocked my poses the same. And then I just hit copy, bake all keys. And I baked everything back to that. And then I just had to clean up my curves and clean up my
Yeah, that makes a
everything
lot of
between
sense.
that.
That's really cool.
And so
Someone asks
Mhm.
if you can bake a selected part of the timeline, or is it
Yes,
everything?
you can. So let me grab this. Let me just delete these keys. I don't believe you can bake a certain part of the timeline. What the heck? I do not believe you can bake a certain part of the timeline with bake all keys, but with bake frames, yes, you can. So if I only want, let's say, this selection, I just select that. I right click, bake frames, and it's only going to bake this selection. It would be nice if you could bake all keys to just a certain selection. So if like I only want these keys to get baked, I select that and do bake all keys. But I don't believe that works. I believe it just does, yeah, everything. So if
Yeah,
I
but
ever want,
that's a very interesting way of using it. I hadn't thought of it that way.
yeah,
And also for anyone who's not in our inner circle, this Twitch was supposed to be called Bake It to a Cube at
that
a
is
point,
true.
or Bake Cubes, because Dan's, whenever there's a problem, I think that even
Mhm.
in life, if you have a problem, like
Bake
just
it
bake
to
it
a
to a
cube.
cube.
Yeah.
Bake it to a cube.
And baking to a cube works more ways than that. So there's times. So like if I show you, which is another tool we'll get into soon, but the rotation order thing, right? So let's say you use the very best rotation order. Even the best has a max gimbal of 43%. So there's some shots that has so much movement, even if you have the best rotation order, you're still gonna have gimbal. So what I do is, let's say this section has gimbal lock, even if it's the best rotation order, because the rest of the shot works great with that rotation order. But this section, there's enough rotations here and there that I have bad gimbal lock. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to go modify, match all transforms, open it up, set a key, and I'm just going to copy, bake all frames. There we go. But this is the section I want to animate the cube because this is the section that needs a alternate rotation order. Now you can have rotation order switches on your control, but it's just such a pain in the butt because you have to wall it off where it's a one frame switch in rotation order. You have these bumps and curves. It causes curve issues. I just do not like it. So what I'm going to do is I select the cube. I delete everything but that section so that without having to think, Animbot can tell me what the best rotation order is. So let's say the best rotation order overall for the shot on my hand is XYZ. But for this section, the actual best rotation order for this section is ZXY. Well, it is XYZ, but let's say for demo purposes that it's ZXY. Well, then I can switch it to ZXY. I can animate this cube perfectly. I can clean up my curves with no gimbal lock. And then I can just bake it back to the wrist on ones. And now I have perfectly smooth animation without having to frame by frame my curves. And that just saves me so much time. And so I use baking to a cube for rotation order issues. I use baking to a cube for getting free like offsets. So like I did a lot of dinosaurs at one point for work, and dinosaurs are very snaky in their motions. So what I would do is I would just take the cog of that velociraptor, move him the way I wanted with the energy, and not animate the head at all. But I would bake the head to a cube because the head is moving based off of what the cog is doing. And then I would just select that cube, offset it 2 frames back, and then I have the head leading the cog because it's moving exactly 1-to-1 with the cog just 2 frames earlier. And then you get, without animating the head at all, this perfect like snaky motion of like the raptor leading everything with the head. And so baking to a cube in simple, it'll save your life, it'll save your relationships, it'll save your career. Doesn't matter what it is, if you bake it to a cube, you will be successful in life.
Are you depressed? Bake it to a cube.
Exactly.
Are you hungry and you don't know what to cook? Bake it to a cube.
Exactly. Baking it to a cube is life. But I'm trying.
He's brainwashed us all.
So, yeah. Yeah. And it even works for like advanced constraint systems and stuff like that of all constrained 2 cubes together and get like, there was a shot in Cana where, hold on. Can I show?
Are you allowed?
It's on YouTube. It's on YouTube.
Then it's okay.
It's on YouTube. Hold on, let me see. I can finally show cool things.
Worst case, I'm sure Hunter would be okay with you showing.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay, let's go to... This is not a spoiler either, by the way. I'm almost there.
Are you looking for a specific scene?
Yes. Okay. Here we go. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. So I animated almost this entire sequence, or a lot of it. But this specific scene coming up right here, Yeah, I toned it down a lot, but I just wanted his hand to touch her back, and I wanted her to react to his hand. So what I did was her spine was very finicky that you couldn't really constrain things to it, right? So I wanted to animate the hand and have it work because it was IK and it's easy to get like translate down, overshoot, whatever. And I wanted the spine to react to the hand, but it was very, very finicky. And so what I did was I just baked X form cube to the hand to where it worked, right? And then I constrained her spine to the cube because the cube wasn't a rig. Like it would only break if rig was constrained to rig. So I had the cube going 1-to-1 with the hand, which was way too much. But then I constrained her spine to the cube and turned the blend parent to 0.1. So no matter what I did with the hand, it would be doing like 20% of that motion or 30% of that motion. And it worked as a really nice buffer because you couldn't constrain rig to rig, but it it works very nicely as a buffer. So if I can show it again, it keeps
Yeah,
skipping
that's really
because
cool.
it's 2 hours worth, but there, right there. Like it's super simple, and I think it got toned down a little bit in post, but I also did an entire hierarchy of I had a cube, a cube, and a cube. And I had an advanced constraint system to where, because I had a tight deadline, I didn't want to have to animate the head and then copy the curves down to the bottom body. So I had it to where I could move the head and the body would move, like the chest would move like 20% because I had a blend parent of 0.2, and then the hips would move like 0.1 of the 0.2, so that all I had to do in that shot was animate the head and everything else just moved along with it. And it worked
Then
because it was quick.
I'm thinking for a rig, we should have not just a proxy version, but a cube version just for
I mean,
you.
that works. Yeah.
So every rig we do, you don't have to do that ever again. You just have the cubes already there
Exactly.
for you to
Every
use.
control has a cube that's already
Yeah,
baked to it.
yeah. But that's a really cool idea also to see it in a more simple way, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like sometimes um, if the rig is too complex, you get caught up in the details. But with
Yeah.
that, you just focus on transitions and rotations, and
Yeah.
that's all that matters.
Exactly. Especially with quadrupeds and dogs. I always bake my quadrupeds to cubes. But I also did that. Okay, so another thing that baking to cubes works amazing for is shoulders. So if she's in this kind of a pose, right? And you move down, your shoulders are not going to do this motion in a rig. They're going to stay stuck and you're going to get this motion, right? So, how do you get a shoulder that's 50% influenced by a stuck bone, but also 50% influenced by a chest, right? So that I move like this, my shoulders aren't pixel locked, like they're moving forward a little bit, but they're also staying still so it feels like my elbows are planted. What I did was I took my first pose, I matched a cube right here. So it's a pixel locked cube, but then I also have the shoulder moving just like this. And then I constrained the shoulder to the cube and put a blend parent of 0.5. So it was moving half with the body, half pixel locked. And you just get this really nice, like, this motion where, like, I could move her body anywhere and the shoulders would feel like they were dragging but not moving 1-to-1 or being pixel locked. So,
That's really cool.
a lot of ways that baking to a cube can change your life.
Oh, someone has a demo request maybe for another stream to
Mm-hmm.
make a demo of basically baking to a cubing quadrupeds and maybe
Yes.
doing a short demo. I think you wanted to do a demo on
Yeah.
quadrupeds. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah. And I can actually possibly hold on. Let me set. I'm drawing a blank of recent projects. Boom. Open. Which one's the latest? This one. I believe I still have cubes on my dog. which I can't show. I can't share the audio to this because last time we got copy striked because it's from Phantom of the Opera. But
Yeah, we
I'll
have
just leave it
two.
there.
Did you show it twice? Did you show it on another stream?
I don't think I showed it twice. Maybe I
Because
did.
yeah, I think so. And every time I see, what is this copyright claim? I look, it's like, oh, it's
Phantom of
Dan's.
the Opera.
Yeah, of course.
But this dog, which this is a very much work in progress shot, but this dog is slower than I'd like, way slower than I'd like. I also redid the textures because I didn't like the original textures. But if you really want to focus on just the chest, hips, and head, also I kind of re-rigged it a little bit. Do I still have the cubes? I probably hid them in the outliner. I have so many cubes in every single shot I animate. I don't know if they're cubes for the dog. Oh, and sometimes, like this, I bake new cubes to the dog because I forget that I already have cubes that are baked. So now you can see two, which honestly, it works though. If you bake cubes to a rig, right, and you make changes, then you can see what your old animation looked like and your new animation looked like with two versions of cubes. So I isolate
True.
selected.
But also, don't be Dan and name your cubes. If you're gonna do this, just name your cubes
So
like
you
a
can
proper
see
person.
you can see how the hips stayed the like I like changed the timing of things. So like here's an old set of cubes and a new set of cubes.
This is like abstract art.
Exactly.
Give it to Kenny to put some music on and do some things.
Exactly.
And this is gonna be a hit.
So you can see that one of them moves with the other one is an old animation. So I'm going to
No, you know what? This gives me like Windows 95 vibes. You weren't probably alive for this, but there was this screensaver that was crazy. It gives me this vibe.
Yeah. So like this is how I animate a lot of quadrupeds once I have my once I have my key poses because it just gives me a much clearer sense of like how is the energy looking, right? Do I want this to lead more? Well, rather than thinking of it in terms of the rig, which is this, I'm just like, okay, can I grab this and I just want this to lead so I can like shrink the time a little bit. And now he leads a little bit more. You see that? Or I'm like, you know what? I want the hips to drag a little bit more. I can select this and I can delay the timing where it's like, okay, now the hips are dragging, right? And you're just thinking about it in terms of like, you know what? I want the hips to sit faster here because they're kind of moving as a unit right here. So I can select this and I can just shrink it in. There we go. Now the hips sit down faster. And you know what? I want to delay this a little bit. So let's select this and let's delay. There we go. Boom. And it also gets you thinking about overshoots and settles for both the chest and the hips. Because if you're looking at a rig, sometimes you don't see the overshoots that need to happen. But if you're just looking at this, it gives you a very simple look.
Did you get this idea from the quad blog beta thingy, the blog?
The what?
You know that blog? I've just put the link. The one where they teach you basically how to do quads, and in the first pass that they do is just like balls for the hips and the chest.
Oh, I have seen this before, but I think I think I was doing this before I saw this blog. I think kind of the reason I came up with this was for this shot actually because whenever I got the Douglas rig, you couldn't use the IK hips without the FK without the cog,
What?
right? Like if for example, if you let me grab this, which is why I have my own IK setup. But basically, if you grabbed the IK hips and moved them away from the cog, the stomach would stay at the cog. So
Oh my god.
I literally had to animate this dog in FK. So the reason I
No, that's
baked it,
just wrong.
yeah, so the reason I baked it to the cubes was so that I could have IK and then at the end just bake it to FK. And then I ended up just creating my own IK. And then later they updated the dog to work with IK. But at that
Oh
point it was
wow.
too late. So
Yeah.
that's why I baked it to cubes because I was like, I need to animate this in IK.
I love it.
But it works. And I realized how easy it was to get like lead and follow with just offsetting the timing of things. And that kind of goes into another tool that is the best tool ever known to man, the smart snap keys. So you can see I have a lot of keys here because I've done a lot of baking, and this was a really old shot and I had a terrible workflow, so everything has too many keys. And that is why I haven't finished this shot, because there are too many keys and it gives me anxiety. But let's say for this, for example, I decided
You could bake all of your keys into twos.
I could. I could. And I tried. And then I got scared and didn't like it. And I exited. Like, I literally reanimated this
It's
shot with
been
Mulan for 3
84
weeks.
years.
Yes. But let's say, for example, I want to retime this late in the process with all these keys. I want this to be faster. So I select. Let me just go ahead and show my favorite tool on the planet. So let's say this section, I like everything about the motion, it just needs to be faster. So I'm going to select the Retime tool. And I'm like, okay, so the start, maybe I want the start to be a little bit slower. So I'm going to wall this off. This is the section that I want to retime. So as he starts to get up, I want him to drag a little bit. So I'm going to set a key marker here. And then I want him to speed up until about here. And then I want him to slow down a little bit. So I just want to speed up the transition here. So I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to pull it over. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to pull it over. And now I have a slower transition, or slower start, faster transition, and a slower end. But now I have all these partial keys. This is where Animbot comes to the rescue words. I can select this, I can go here, I can get Animbot Extra Tools, Smart Snap Keys. Everything just immediately got snapped to whole frames, and it's not like Maya, where if you have a frame on 0.2, or let's say you have this key right here on frame 220, and you have a frame on 220.4. If you're in Maya, it grabs both keys and just mushes them together, and then you have offsetting keys. What Animbot does is it has a key on 220, a key on 220.4. It's like, okay, let's set a key on 220 and delete the one on 220.4, but also set a key on 221 so we keep the curve the same, right? Because that key on 220.4 is important because it's dictating where the curve is on 221. So what it does is it just sets a key on 220, 221, and deletes 220.4, keeps the curve the same, but you don't lose any animation. So now I have all whole frames. I have the ease at the first like I wanted, I have an ease at the end like I wanted, and I have a faster transition. And there you go. Perfect. That's why
I'm hearing about this the first time now, and I want to cry at all the time that I've wasted in the
yeah.
past. Because this is just perfect.
Yeah. And so because I was animating a lot of frames on Kana, and I was using, because a lot of my shots, my specialty kind of is the layered workflow and close-up acting shots. That's a lot of what I did on Kana, was Kana acting, moving head motions, but not anything broad. Like it was all contained to like chest-up shots. That's a lot of what I did. So what I would do is I would animate the head, I would bake it down to the neck, the chest, all of that, which when you do that, one of the yeah, exactly, Chester. What I would do is that when you do the layered workflow, sometimes it's very easy to get soft, mushy animation because once you copy things down, you don't have that snappy timing that you had in the head because of just offset layers. So what I would do is I would animate fully everything offset keys, and then I would just go through and I'd retime everything. Make sure the head is hitting where I want it to again. Make sure the body is snapping over and this and that and that. And then I just smart snap keys. And I was retiming things as late as polish. Like Hunter would give me a note like do this and it's final. I'd retime it, smart snap keys, and it was still final. Like it was the absolute godsend because there were times where I was animating 500 frames in a day, 600 frames in a day. Like that wasn't a lot. I'd say my average frameage on Kana was 700 frames a week, but you know, depending on the shot difficulty and the needs, like there were times that being able to retime and keep my animation was so nice.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes to already smart snap keys, I guess motion trails.
I mean, you could show a little bit, maybe more in detail, the select, what's it called? Um, the pink one.
Oh, this one,
that
yeah,
we
I
love.
forgot about that. It's the best. That one would be better to show on an actual rig. So let's go back to this one.
This tool is one of my absolute favorites. It saves my life all the time because I'm a very sloppy animator sometimes. I don't think about everything in advance. I'm not thinking about my rotation orders in advance. I'm not thinking about where, I don't know, if like, let's say there's a IK wrist, is it the chest that's going to be the parent, or is it the hips or whatever? And Animbot saves my life. It
Mm-hmm.
What it does, it's basically you can let it the way that I use it for, at least, is, let's say I have a rotation order. In that tool, I am able to change all of my rotation orders for the whole animation, and it keeps my animation exactly like it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you change your rotation order in Maya, it will change your animation. Or
Mm-hmm.
even, let's say an IK wrist is parented to the chest, and now you want it to be parented, not as in a constraint, but just like the actual parent that is like virtually linked to without being a constraint. You want to change it to the hips. If you do it manually, you lose the position and you need to bring it back. With this tool, it changes in all the keys and it maintains your animation.
Yep.
And you're happy.
Yeah. It is the best. So like for example, the head here, I have all my animation here. It's all nice, but then I go and I'm like, I'm having gimbal issues. You can go to rotation order. I'm like, oh, well, this is a better rotation order than this, which means I have less gimbal, which I chose this one specifically because another important thing about gimbal is the one that it calls best is the one with the least amount of, or the least average. So right now, 15% of my shot is gimbaled with this one. 20% is gimbaled with this one. This one has a max of 17%. This one has a max of 36%. So this one, by the numbers, is the better rotation order. But if I'm not mistaken, I really put an importance on being able to have a perfect side to side because that's a lot of what my shot is. It's like he's like doing a lot of side to side shaking, and especially when he goes like down like this, I want to keep that perfect side because this is the motion that I think is the most important. And if I was to switch this rotation order to best, it changed it. And so I think what I did in this shot was that I decided that for me, what works in my brain with animating the curves, that this one was a better rotation order just for what I needed at that point than this one. But if I get done cleaning up what I want to, I've done it where I've switched it to one rotation order, cleaned up my RY curve, then switched to a different rotation order, cleaned up my XZ curve, and then I went to a different one and cleaned my X curve. That way I had a perfect rotation curve on all. It bakes a lot of keys, but it does work. And so I can switch to here, and my animation is the exact same, and I have a different rotation order, which means that now I have a perfect RX curve that I can clean up, right? So on the other rotation order, my RX was pretty clean. Here, I can see that it's a fairly linear transition down. So then I could go through, now that I have a different rotation order, and This is the issue I was talking about with the graph editor, where you select something, you delete it, and it resets your selection. So I'm going to have to delete my graph editor and then pull it back up.
So, answering Pratham's question, at least in my case, ideally, yes. I try to think of rotation orders. If they are if I know that they're going to be an issue of, for example, I know that a certain character has a default rotation order that I just don't like, I set it up from the start.
Yep.
But sometimes what I do, if let's say there's no time, because sometimes depending on production, you don't even have time to think.
Yep.
So sometimes what I do is I just start animating, and if I see that I'm struggling with a rotation order, I'll just change it. I'm like, oh, this is just too annoying. Okay, I'm going to change it to the one that I actually need.
Yep.
And then in terms of world or local space, I animate changing all the time. I switch from world to local all the time. So for me, it's not an issue. I'm not thinking, no, I'm going to animate with gimbal today. No, I change it depending on what I need. So I don't know how it is for you, Dan.
Yeah. For me, it's like sometimes the difference in what makes a good and bad rotation order is very, very nuanced, because I mean, you have 6 different rotation orders you can choose from. And so for me, I decide my rotation order after first pass blocking, because motions change, different things change after your first place blocking that may make one rotation order better than the other. So, like you said, if there's a character and I know he's doing a 360 spin, I'm already going to set it up to where the RY does not get gimbal, because I know off the bat that that's going to be an issue. But everything else is kind of up for grabs. So I kind of wait until after my first pass blocking. Even without Animbot, again, you can bake it to a cube and switch your rotation order and then bake it back. That's the way I used to do rotation order switches before Animbot. I mean, it's true.
It is true. But I love it that, like, guess what? We should have named this channel Bake It to a Cube.
I know. But like that's the way I used to do it, is I would animate, because that's the thing, is the older version of Animbot, you couldn't switch a rotation order with this thing if the rotation order switch was in the attribute editor. It had to be in the channel box. Some rigs didn't have rotation order switching in the channel box. Now Animbot can do it with either. But back in the day, I was animating with rigs.
Only in the Pro version, I think.
Yeah, only in the Pro
I don't
version.
know if the Eco version has it. Yeah.
But I would animate shots where this rotation order switching was in the attribute editor, so I would just bake it to a cube, switch the rotation order, which messed up my animation, but then I'd bake the animation back onto the character, and it would work just fine. So I always wait till kind of after first pass blocking. But the other thing that's nice about this is that not only does it do rotation orders, it can do space switching. So maybe right off the bat, just for ease of blocking, most of the time I like having my head in chest space, because if I have a character turn around, I want to rotate the hips. I don't want to have to rotate the head too, and that's a lot of unnecessary translation and stuff. But once I get into spline, once I'm done blocking, I don't want the head to be moving with the body super stiff. So then I can go in and I can just hit space switch global, right? Or I can switch it to chest space or body or neck space, whatever I want to switch it to, and it'll keep all my animation. So it goes from, rotating the chest and the head stays still, to rotating the chest and the head moves with. And there's so many different situations where you would want one over the other, but being able to switch it midway through is just the bomb diggity. Especially with hands. Because there's also times where, like, you have a character, like, maybe they're leaning against a wall, right? And you want that hand in, like, global space. But then they put their hand on their chest and they're like talking, right? Well, then you want the hand in chest space. So for me personally, I would probably block all of it out in global space just to get my poses in. But then once I hit spline, I'm going to place the hand here, delete all the keys after that, and then flip this key over one frame to chest space, and then just kind of animate like some offset and stuff using like a temp rotation order so I can rotate from the chest. And then I just go from there. And so being able to switch that, I can set a key the frame before in global, frame here, and then switch it so I have a perfect seamless one frame switch that doesn't pop or anything like that. So, safe to say, this thing, if it wasn't for it, I would be baking to a cube 50 times a day, but now I only bake to a cube 10 times a day. Because again, you can switch spaces by baking to a cube.
I love this.
So
Yeah, but yeah, you make very good points. It's just really funny. Yeah, that tool has saved my life many, many times.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah. Do you use the ones that are next? I only use the temp pivot one from the bluish ones right next to
Yes.
it. Because the temp pivot is again another one that sometimes, like you said, like if you have the hand on the chest and you want to do something but the fingers need to be glued, instead of having to do some weird constraint system or whatever, I just use a temp pivot and I'm happy.
Yeah. And I use that a lot for breathing. I've talked about this a lot before. The breathing controls that any character has are nice, but it will never get you exactly what you need, because when you breathe, like, you don't just do this motion, right? When you breathe, you rotate like a deep breath, right? You go, you're pivoting right from the base of the neck. So most of the time when I do breaths, I'll select this, I'll grab the temp pivot control, I'll place it roughly right here, and then I will rotate here. So now he actually looks like he's breathing because everything's being affected by the breath, right? So when he's like, right, like he just pulled the knife out, he's like, right? I'm pretty sure I went to a temp pivot, and you can see he's pivoting from that area, right? He's going like, and he's like wincing and he's breathing upwards. So I use temp pivot all the time for breathing. Yeah, the baking to a cube, I kind of pioneered the cube. I think most animators use locators. Like, you'll find that my method isn't anything new. I didn't pick it up from anyone really. I think I kind of came up with it myself, but now that I'm in the industry with a lot of, definitely in more technical areas of animation, it's used on a daily basis, but I'm just the only one that uses cubes. Everyone else uses locators. I don't like locators because they're hard to see a lot of the time. And if I ever want to isolate selected and just watch the cubes, like I showed with the dog, you can't do that really with locators. The only downside to using cubes is if you have this turned off a lot of times, so you don't select your geometry, you can't select your cubes. So, I know one of the most famous people, which I didn't even know this until a couple of my friends took his class, is Daniel Clue. Almost animates the exact same way, but he uses locators. But it was funny because a friend of mine was taking his class, and he heard me rant and rant and rant about baking to cubes, and Daniel Clue did like 4 different lectures on everything I had talked about, but it was just with locators. And he came back to me. He was like, it was so funny. He did exactly what you were doing. It was just locators instead of cubes. And so I was
I
like,
love it.
it made me sleep happy at night knowing that he was doing the same things that I were doing. And I was like, yes. But he's,
I mean, you know you're doing something right because it works.
yeah.
Like what
I
you're
mean,
doing
it
works and
works.
your animation looks great. So
Yeah. I mean,
it clearly, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Except he's on the locator range. You know, we haven't
Do you think that
transferred.
it's a Daniel thing?
It might
Everyone
be.
who's called Dan.
Oh,
If your
yeah.
name is Dan, if your name is Dan, you bake it to something.
Yeah. You bake it to something. The Daniels are just, we're creative
You're bakers.
bakers. We just like baking things. But
I think the only, like, I agree with you that locators are harder to see, but the only upside to that is that there's little chance that they will appear anywhere down the pipeline.
yeah.
So, but I barely use locators anymore.
Yeah.
I want to see what's happening.
Yeah. I don't hardly ever use locators anymore. And
Yeah.
if I ever do a constraint system, which again, this is another really nice thing with this thing. Oh, hold on. I need to reopen this shot because Maya decided it doesn't like me today. But so the way, like, let's say, if you're talking about in a rigging sense, the way that global space on a head control works, or neck space, or chest space, all of that is just a series of constrained group nodes, right? Because a group node is essentially a mini world in which you translate things in, right? So, for example, if I have a cube, let's create a cube, and let's put it inside a group, right? If I move the cube over, it's negative 500 in translate z. But if I move the group node over, the cube is still at 0, right? So theoretically, if you have a group node constrained with a control underneath it, you can move that group however you want and the control will still stay at 0. And in rigging, that's how your space switching works, right? So if this head is in chest space, that chest is literally constraining a group above the head that's moving the head control, so the head control stays at 0, and then you can move the head's control underneath that group, right? That's how rigging setups are done. And so if you're switching spaces between chest space, head space, hip space, all of that, you're literally just switching constraints between groups. And I can even probably show that if I go up high enough. Right here, you have your chest space locator constraint, you have your body space locator constraint, global, and neck. And whenever you switch your spaces, you're literally keying these constraints on and off. So if you want to create your own, which I've done, let's say I want this knife to have a neck space, a hand space, and a world space. I just created a group node above the knife, and I constrained it to the neck, and I constrained it to the arm. And then using set driven keys, I make this turns on and off the constraint. So now, hopefully this works. Sometimes it's a little bit buggy. If I want to switch this from neck space to world space, I can do it in Animbot and I can turn it off. And boom. The knife no longer follows the neck, but it's in the same space, same place. Or I can turn it back on, neck space, turn on. Now the knife follows perfectly. And I will never do a constraint any other way than using group node above and constraining that group node to everything I'm going to have it doing, because then it makes your graph editor so clean. Because if you've ever used locator constraints or anything like that, your curves are all over the place. They're popping, they're this, they're that. This makes perfectly clean curves. So,
Yeah, that's
and you
why
can switch it.
I I find it super funny when people are terrified of constraints and always having problems. I think it's because they're not understanding how simple they can be.
Yeah.
I've been grouping my constraints for a long time, also because I do like having offsets aside from my constraint,
Yeah,
just because
exactly.
what if I need to move something?
Mm-hmm.
It's way more simple than people think. I think it's playing with the possibilities rather than being like, no, I'm never going to do a constraint in my life. You can do constraints for everything,
Yeah.
like you were saying before, of like having percentages
Mm-hmm.
in a constraint so that it moves and follows but not exactly.
Yeah.
That saves you so much time animating.
Yeah. And you can even animate constraints. You can even use constraints to get perfect overlap. I mean, if you've ever used the overlapper, which was another tool I was going to show super quickly, um, how's an easy way to? I'll just create. Let me just create.
I'm impressed Animbot doesn't have an overlapper by now.
Yeah, it's so nice. But let's just say I'm just going to duplicate, 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 duplicate. Here we go. And now I'm just going to, in the outliner, I'm just going to create. There we go. We just have a very simple hierarchy like this. And now I'm just going to set a key, Set a key. Okay, so just base motion, right? So now if I use the overlapper, which again, if you're a student, do not touch this tool. Learn to do
No.
overlap yourself. If you're a professional, your time, your speed, your ability to animate overlap fast is a commodity and it will get you jobs. And I have no fear that I can animate overlap on my own by hand. If I ever get to a place without the overlapper, I don't have any doubt in myself that I can animate it perfectly fine. But do I want to? No, I don't. Will I ever animate overlap if I don't have to? No, I won't. Cuz this is so much easier and it works. And so what this does is I just set the softness, which I animated every piece of hair on Kana on over 80 shots. Animating
so
that by
sorry for
hand,
you.
animating that by hand would have taken me hours and hours and hours. I would say combined time animating her hair in Kana for all 80 shots put together, maybe 5 hours for all shots because I literally my first day at Emberlab, I went in and I did a bunch of tests. I came up with a set numbers for everything and I just used that for every shot. So her side hair, it was a softness of 1.5 with a scale of 2.5. The hair at the back, like the bun, was a softness of 0.8 with a scale of 1.2. And then all the hair at the front was 1.2 softness and 1.2 scale. You did the overlapper and it looked perfect and it was consistent. Through every single shot, it was consistent and it would take me 10 minutes to animate overall.
I love it.
And sometimes I had to bake it to a cube. So here's another thing about the overlapper.
Of course you did.
So the thing with the
I'm gonna
overlapper,
dream about cubes tonight.
the thing with the overlapper is it uses orient constraints to get free overlap. So if you have this cube moving, right? It's going to do an orient constraint on this cube to make it always facing down, right? So it's going to create a node down here. It's going to constrain this to where even when this cube rotates this way, this one is still facing this way. And then it's going to key it to ones, delete that constraint, offset it. And then it's going to do it with the next one. Constrain it, key it on ones, offset it. And it creates perfect overlap. But on certain rigs that already have a advanced constraint set up on their hair, maybe to get follow a line or this or that, it just totally breaks it. So what I had to do on production, especially with like Taro, the character, with the blue braids, I would create cubes where his hair should be, do a simple parent hierarchy like I did here, overlap the cubes, and then X-form it to the hair. So that I still get it, but I'm not actually overlapping the hair because the hair had some whack constraints, and you would just get like spaghetti curves anytime you tried to overlap it, and it was just spinning. So cube proxy hierarchies to do your overlapping, it's beautiful. But let's just say for softness, you have 1.5, scale, you have 2. Hierarchy, so the different things here, cycle, it will literally cycle the overlap for you so that at the end of your timeline, it's the exact same as the first of your timeline. Super nice for games. Adding translate, if you have an IK hair, it doesn't really work as well as other things. Don't use first controls. That's for non-hierarchies. You can grab 2 controls that are not part of a hierarchy. Say, overlap the second control based off of what the first control is doing, but don't overlap the first control. But those don't typically work as well as the hierarchy. So I'm just going to grab this guy, hierarchy, overlap. And it's going to go through. And now we have perfect overlap. That would take an hour to do. And then you can bake it to the hair. But again, this is just...
No one here studying uses this, okay?
Yeah, nobody.
No one that is in class 1 is like, oh, I'm going to do this. No.
No.
You need to learn how to do proper overlap first.
Yes, exactly. If you can't animate overlap, all this thing is going to do is going to set you up for failure when you get a job. But if you know how to animate overlap, and I mean actually know, meaning I animated hair, or I animated the pendulum, the squirrel tail in class 1. I animated Stella's hair for a walk cycle in class 2. I animated Stella's hair in an ice skating shot in second term of class 3. I animated Aya's hair in class 6 by myself. I animated dinosaur tails for 6 months by myself. After that, then you can use this because you know no matter what you get overlap wise, you can do it on your own. And this is just a time saver for those professionals out there that want to save time from dying at work animating hair. But you can also use the wind, which I love a lot. Let's just go ahead and delete this. You can just one scale, one speed. I'd use this a lot for Kana if there was ever wind or something and like the hair was just still and boring. Like cool, just ambient wave. And it is super, super nice for hair. And if you want to do more, like I can up this scale to like 5, speed 10. This may be too much, but let's try it. I mean, it's a lot, but it still works, right?
Oh my god. Yeah. Going crazy.
And what you can also do if you're wanting like slow wind, right? And then all of a sudden the wind gets like violent, I would have 2 of these. So I would have one with scale of wind at like, let's say 2 and 7, right? And let's just go ahead and animate that. I may have messed up by duplicating.
Oh no.
But anyway, let's say you have 2 hierarchies, one with super fast violent, one with super slow, and they're both at the exact same place where your hair should be. You constrain the hair to both sets of hierarchies of cubes. But you have your blend parent set to slow animation and fast animation. And then whenever in the shot, when you want that high frequency, you just key the blend parent to the high frequency and key off the blend parent to the low frequency. So you're keying between 2 different constraints. So that way, if you're having your shot and the character's talking and it's low wind, and then you want this big old gust of wind, key your constraint from the slow wind to the fast wind, and it'll go whoosh fast. And it's super handy
That's
and
very
cool.
cool. I think you're gonna have to kill Maya.
Yeah, probably. That's the weird thing is sometimes it'll do this and it'll just sit here and think about things forever, but you can still move Maya around, which confuses me so much.
That's super weird.
But let me just kill Maya. Don't save. But did you have anything else you wanted to go over for Animbot or anything like that?
Maybe you can go over a little bit more on how to do the motion trails offset and how
Yes.
to activate it. Maybe how to use it for tracking the nose. That's what I use it for the most.
Yes.
Just because sometimes even if you have a control on the nose, it's never exactly in the vertex in the tip of the nose.
Yeah.
And I need it there. And I sometimes use it even, let's say, to track the base of the neck, but when you put the control, it's in the middle of the neck. So I whoosh, move it to a point that I need.
Yep.
I think that tool is also very useful, especially because doing that with Maya takes forever and it's super slow. So it's a really good tool to track things very, very quickly.
Yeah. And the nice thing about that is the farther you move the curve from the head, the bigger the curve is going to be that shows what the nose is doing. So sometimes if it's super subtle animation, I move that bad boy way, way, way out there. That way I can see every micro little curve that I have.
I just pan zoom a lot. I want to zoom in more. Pan zoom is also something that I don't know where it's been all my life because I love it.
I love 2D pan and zoom.
Yeah, I don't think I have any other tools that I use from Animbot. To be honest, the ones that are closer to the right side of the screen, I barely see them.
Yeah.
If anyone here has any tools that they saw in Animbot and they want us to check them out and try them out now, feel free to type them in the chat. Because Animbot is so big and it has so many things. Like I know a lot of my friends use other tools that we haven't even mentioned here. Like on the sliders, for example, I have a friend who uses a lot of the green sliders and he even has hotkeys for them. And I was like, cool. I don't use this, but cool. So the grab release tool. Do you know which one is that?
The grab release tool. Micro manipulator. Temp pivot. Temp controls. For me,
it sounds like the one that it was the same as the tool that you showed from Aaron Carreso.
Maybe.
But
I'm not sure.
Are you sharing already?
What? No, not yet.
Did you? Oh, okay.
I just got my yeah. But the temp controls, in my opinion, are just a glorified version of baking to a cube. It's just a control. So if you want to do the temp controls, that will do the exact same thing that baking to a cube will do. I'm just more I'm more
cube prone.
Yeah, I'm more cube prone.
I love this.
But since we're showing the nose, I'm going to show another trick that I showed earlier, but some of y'all may have not been there. So this is the Animbot motion trail. If you're not using this and you're using Maya's base, stop it. Get some help.
Why do you hate yourself?
Maya's are editable, which they've gotten better, to be fair. They are way better than they were in 2015, but they are still not very good at all. They're so clunky, they're stupid. You can edit them. I hate the fact that you can edit them. I think that's a really dumb trait.
Yeah.
Animbots, you can create them. You can set your offset, so you can offset them wherever you want. So you can place them on the nose. It's going to show what the nose does. You can show your style. So many different styles. Frames before and after, you can do all. 48 frames before and after, 24. Let's just go ahead and do all for now. Transparency fall off. Let's just go ahead and take that off. Camera space, relative space.
I forget that there's so many.
Yeah. So like, so many nice tools you can do here. And I can see exactly what the nose is doing. And if I want to see better, because like that's a fairly nuanced curve. Let's say I want to see it even more. Offset, boom. Let's just move it farther away.
You can click Alt-click and it does the offset.
It does?
Yeah, if you Alt-click the tool, it turns on the offset.
That's nice.
Basically it selects the motion trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like the closer you get to the head, the less you're going to see the movement because it's super subtle movement. The farther away, it's just like leverage, right? Like if you see me moving this, like it's only moving this much. But if I took a point and placed it here, the amount it's changing is massively huge. So that way you can really get in and nitpick your curves on the nose to be like, I want this curve to be better. So like I can go in and be like, the nose right here, it kind of hits a straight line here. So I kind of want to move it just slightly and stuff like that. So I love the offset curve. I use it for both wrist rotations and the nose. The only problem with it, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, once you offset, you can't reset it back to the original. I haven't figured out how to do that other than system restart. And if you restart Animbot, then you can do it back, which isn't a big pain, but I just wish there was a reset offset button
Yeah.
for Animbot.
But there's also a thing that people might run into, just to mention it, that sometimes maybe the motion trail for some reason it's not updating correctly, and it crashed.
Yeah.
You can, like Dan was right clicking and showing the menu, you can just reset
Mm-hmm.
the motion trail, and then it resets to whatever you had it, but it's like sometimes it doesn't update because I don't know, glitches happen. So
Yep.
you can just do that and it works.
Yep.
Maya is being such a nice Maya today.
Mm-hmm. Totally. It's opening
Yeah.
right back up, so hold on.
And it's normal. When does Maya not crash?
Yeah.
Have you seen that meme that is like a little girl talking with Santa, and she's like, and he's like, "What do you want for Christmas?" And she's like, "A dragon." No, so like ask me for something else. That's not realistic enough. Okay, Maya not crashing. So what color of a dragon do you want?
True. I haven't seen it. Was that something that Salty posted?
We love Salty.
Okay,
Yeah.
we are back. Again, another reason why I love it, because every time Maya crashes, I have to do this. So that's why I love the hotkeys that turn on NURBS and polygons. Also, I hate it that after some update, every time I open Maya, my cache playback is on.
Really?
Yeah.
That never happens to me.
It's super dumb.
And I have 2019 too.
For me, 2019 is by far the best version of Maya.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't tried 2020 though, but I don't know. I haven't heard anyone using it either.
Yeah, I do, Mjossi, but for some reason, like if I reset my preferences, it would fix the issue. But Maya is in a really weird spot to where it will not update the settings I closed on since a crash 2 months ago. So I was doing some rigging in my rigging workspace like 2 months ago, and Maya crashed. Ever since then, no matter what I do, even if I close Maya, I save my animation workspace. If I close Maya, open it back up, it opens up in the rigging workspace. If I close, typically it does your last used project. No matter what project I use, my brother's project is always the last project, most recent. And the file, it's always the most, like I could open 20 files up, save Maya, open it back up. This shot right here will always be the last used shot. It's like Maya's stuck in a time warp. And that's why my cache playback always opens up. For me, it's 2019. 2019 is more stable. Other than that bug, typically I do not have any crashes at all. Like today is the most crashes I've had in this entire week combined. I don't know why it's crashing, but for me, Maya 2019 is super stable, doesn't really have any issues other than the stupid graph editor one that we saw today. Like every issue I have showed up today. But typically 2019 is super, super stable and isn't that bad for me. 2020 just seems to be more buggy.
For me, 2019 is very stable. What makes it crash is rigs. Like certain rigs don't like something, for example. But it's pretty good.
Yeah. But another thing I wanted to show really quickly in terms of the nose. If I offset, place this here. When I'm animating my head, I typically, which I totally changed things afterwards, which is why it looks so weird. But if I can quickly go through and set my keys and just delete, just to show how cool this little tip is.
this Animbot where you're gonna show?
No, it's actually just a animation tip. So once you get done with your blocking, let's say this is the blocking that I have. If you have, say, let's go off here, a head turn, right? Let me turn off tracking for now. And let's just say I have a character that's looking up here, and then he looks down this way. Let me go ahead and open up my timeline. You get a perfectly straight line. And if I turn on my tracking, you can see that it's a straight line. And let me go ahead and turn my offset to frames before and after 24. There we go. So you can see that it's almost a perfectly straight line that the nose is moving. But if I think about a head turn, I'm like, okay, if I'm looking this way and I'm looking this way, thank you for the follow. If I'm looking up this way and I look down this way, I'm thinking like, okay, what's moving first? Probably my RX, because that's the up and down. I start to move RX, then I start to move RY, and then I move RZ. So if I just go into my curves and I move, okay, RX is going to move first. Let's offset that back 2 frames. Then RY, so I'll leave that as is. RZ starts moving last. Let's offset that 2 frames. Without adding any in-betweens, I have a perfect curve in my nose. I went from having a perfect straight line. If you see, I'm going to offset these back again. There we go. I had a straight line in the nose. If you look at the curve, it's a perfectly straight line. And to help better show that, I'm going to delete the keys beforehand. There we go. Now let's force refresh. There we go. Perfect straight line in the nose. And just by offsetting 2 frames to the left, the RX, 2 frames to the right, the RZ, now I have a perfect arc in my nose. Right? And literally, so what I do in my workflow is whenever I block out the head, I go through each motion, like right here. So if I have a character that's like doing this kind of a head move, I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to be leading RZ like that. And then it's going to be RY and RX is going to come last. I'm going to take that whole section, offset my RZ, and then delay my RX, and I get perfect arcs in my nose without having to do any hardball in-betweens or anything like that. It's all for free. Now, once you do that, you kind of have to add information after that, which is kind of where you get what I had that I just nuked. Let me get that back. Here we go. So all of this is just offset keys. As you can see, you have groups of three keys, 1, 2, 3. It's because I offset 1 curve, 1 frame back, 1 curve, 1 frame forward, and it got me really nice arcs. Now I went through and switched rotation orders and changed things and refined from there, but it gives you a really, really solid place to start of like all these tiny little micro arcs in the nose right here. Like this little figure 8, this little figure 8 here, all that came just by offsetting 1 frame forward, 1 frame back. I didn't do any of that by hand. And so it's a super nice, easy way to get free arcs in your nose. And then refine.
I do that also for the face, especially for the eyebrows. When I animate my eyebrows and I block them out, I don't block out the arcs. I just block out the up, downs, and side to side. And then at the end of my animation, I do 2 frames forward or 2 frames back, depending on where I need it. And that's just so easy.
I do it in the mouth corners too. I do it in the mouth corners. Like if you offset the TY and TX, you get these nice circle settles and arcs in your mouth corners, and you don't have to do that stupid, ugly face cam where you go through and you track arcs on the corners. Ugh, I don't like it. I just offset it, and if it looks good in the shot cam, I call it good.
That's it. I animate the face so differently, and I know some people don't like it this way. I sometimes focus so much on the graphical shape that doing that, I tried it so many times and it destroys my brain. So I do it manually, but I never use the face cam. I only do it to the actual camera. So sometimes I only have to do it on one mouth corner because
Yeah.
the other maybe you basically don't see it. Um, and a lot of people were like, no, that's wrong. How do you do this? But then I asked one of my very good friend who is an animator who worked on Spider-Verse, and he's like, and I was like, how do you get such beautiful arcs in the mouth? And he was like, I don't know. Sometimes I animate it by ones on ones. I'm like, oh, thank God,
Yeah.
thank you. I feel much better now. So it's whatever works for you, but I would say definitely try all of this because
Hmm.
you never know what's gonna save you so much time.
Yeah. I have a very different workflow that came from my supervisor on Kana of I I literally am a very like I never thought of the eye mask in terms of energy, which is kind of dumb because that's how my brain works with animation at all. Like everything I do in terms of animation, my brain thinks better of in terms of energy and connectivity. So what I started doing with the eye mask is I go through and I block a few poses here and there. Like let's say this pose, I posed out, and like this one I posed out myself. Everything else, what I do is before I start any shot, I have a, if post library will open, I have a pre-made squash pose and stretch pose that's perfectly neutral that will not destroy my faces. So if I go to Memnon, where is Memnon? Here we go. Squash, stretch pose. Super, super pushed. And what I'll do, what I did for this entire sequence was, so he's like, it's hard to beat an enemy when he's, you know, living inside your own head. So all I wanted was a flare of it's hard, right? So I just had this pose here. Let me go ahead and delete this. And I wanted to flare it on frame 93. So I had this pose was the exact same. And then I went in, I selected this, and I just middle mouse blended it on until the eye mask stretched as far as I wanted it. And I'm like, oh, cool. That's kind of the flare that I want. And then I went in and I was like, okay, I want to punch it. I want it to overshoot. So I'm going to take here and I'm going to tween everything back. So that way it's right there. It's hard to beat. And then all I have to do after that is I have to go in and offset my brows one frame forward so that the brows are leading the action. And then I kind of do what you do of like offsetting things to get free arcs. But then
Yeah.
I'm very much animating as in like how is the eye mask squashing and stretching through my whole shot. And because my squash and stretch poses are neutral in that there's no favoring this side or that side, I can favor them in the poses that I pose. And when I blend it on, the pose I have isn't going to be destroyed. So if I have this side higher than this one, blending on is just going to raise both of them the same amount.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Yeah,
a,
in this project we have some people did squash and stretch poses, and I thank you so much.
yeah,
It even for the mouth, for the whole face basically, it
yeah,
saves you
so much
so
time.
much time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll never do anything else again. It works very, very well for me. And
What
like,
you don't bake the face to a cube?
no, no. I have not figured out how to use the cubes for a face, but I will one day.
I'll be waiting for that demo.
Yeah. But
So I think that's like I sometimes use the bookmarks on Animbot, but when I say sometimes, I mean I used it last year once.
same.
So it's like it's a tool that you might find helpful if you
Hmm.
are animating something and you want to remember, oh, this section is, I don't know, shot whatever's free animation, and you put a
Yep.
bookmark with a title that says something.
Yeah.
If you want to use it, use it. For me
Yeah.
personally, it would take more time to settle that up
Hmm.
than to actually animate.
Yeah.
So,
The only
yeah.
thing I've ever used it for, which it kind of helped, but I again, like you, I only used it once last year, but I had a rotation order switch on a shot just because the
Mm.
control was not working for me, which I ended up using the bake it to a cube method. But at the time, I literally put rotation order switch here, because I kept
Yeah.
going to that area and trying to clean up the massive pop that was in the curves, and then realizing that I was having a massive visual pop, and I was like, what's going on? And then I realized that I had keyed a rotation order switch over one frame. And so I
Uh,
literally put a bookmark there that said rotation order switch, and that way I always remembered that that was there. But
yeah.
again, is a very nuanced control that can be cool sometimes. I even used it to like try to block out my phonemes once, but that didn't
Yeah.
work.
I tried to, but the way I do my phonemes is very, I don't I say old school in the sense that I do kind of my X sheet with blue pencil, drawing it on the screen where my phonemes are. But also people need to remember that everything you add, whether you want it or not, and it's not a lot, but it adds extra information to your scene, making it a little bit heavier and potentially clashing with some rigs. That's what happened a lot in Spirit. Supposedly, some of the Animbot tools were clashing with the rigs. Um, sure. So just be mindful of that. Like adding bookmarks, it's not like it's going to make your scene super heavy or anything. It's just adding a little bit extra.
Yep.
It's just being mindful of that. But it's not, honestly, I've never had any problems, but people like to blame Animbot. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Does anyone have any questions on Animbot or on anything animation, life, or whatever? Because if not, I think we could call it here,
Yeah.
unless
I
anyone
mean,
has questions.
I'd love to talk about cubes more, but I think we've talked
But I
about
think we,
all the cubes we
but I
can.
think that deserves a separate demo,
Probably.
like an actual demo that we can
Yeah.
have separate, because
Mhm.
we've already gone over 2 hours.
Oh, shoot. I
Yeah,
didn't even know we
exactly. If someone is like, "Hey, where is the demo?" It's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that
yeah.
long stream
Yeah, I
about
mean,
Animbot."
listen, when you're talking about cubes, time just flies, you know? It's like time stops when you talk about
But yeah,
cubes.
I think that it would be cool to see
Yeah.
a cube demo for a creature shot that you do.
Yeah.
I would definitely be interested in looking at your workflow like
Yeah.
that.
Cuz I've done some before, and with my new job that I'm starting in a couple weeks, I will probably be using it a lot on creatures. So, cool.
Cube man. I feel like now that you have a green screen, it should just be filled with cubes. Someone
Bouncing.
should do a drawing. Yeah, cubes everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, if we can get the cult following of cubes a little bit stronger, then we can start selling bake it to a cube merch, you know? Coffee mugs, t-shirts, everything's just bake it to a cube. Then we go to CTN and everyone's wearing bake it to a cube merch.
And no one understands why. What are these crazy people? Kind of like what happened, like the hoodie that I'm wearing now, to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
When we went to CTN, the 19 people that were at my Airbnb had the t-shirt or the hoodie, and everyone was like, "What is that? Is it a cult? Why are you guys wearing the same thing?" I know.
I mean, if we're gonna make it into a cube cult, everyone needs to buy like rather than just a bake it to a cube shirt, it needs to be like a robe, bake it to a cube robe, with like the big long sleeves. Everybody can walk around with it like in the
I
sleeves.
love it.
It'd be the best.
Definitely. Look, we already have 2 people interested. So that makes what? How many people are in our Discord? The like our friend Discord? What is it like? 8 people are
8
interested
people?
in this.
Yeah, at
Like,
least eight,
yeah.
probably
Look,
more.
there we go. 9.
Let's do it. Cool.
Starting the pre-orders. No, but no. See, why did we make a rig? We
Yeah.
should be selling merch.
That's
They're
true.
selling.
That's true.
Ooh, the clothes for Leo.
Leo can have a bake it to a cube shirt.
Make it to a cube, and again, I think the rig has to have a cube version for everything.
I mean, I am gonna make a proxy version, which is honestly a demo I should probably do for you guys.
How to make
because
a proxy rig?
yes. Hold on.
Yes,
Let
because
me.
I don't know how to do that.
Because I make one for every rig I have now, and it's so nice because it's better than every crappy proxy rig you have from other rigs.
Or don't
Because,
have.
yeah.
I don't remember a time where I have a proxy rig.
So,
It's been 84 years.
yeah. So, like for Aya, if you remember, she does not have facial controls on her proxy rig.
Yeah.
And that is, I hate it. So, for the proxy rig that I made, there's just a control at the root, and then you turn proxy on, boom. Why are there keys on the proxy rig? Let me just delete those real quick. There we go. So if I turn proxy mode on, he still has facial controls. And this rig, so if I have proxy mode off, if I go to Windows, where's my HUD? UI elements, general. Do you remember where the, oh, I can't remember.
What?
Where I can show my FPS?
Uh, um, display?
Thank you.
Not in,
Heads up display.
yeah.
Frame rate. There we
Yeah.
go. So if you can see, I'm getting a solid 21.7. Hold on. What is my speed? Real time? What is my real time set to? 24. Okay, cool. So I'm getting like, sometimes I'm getting 21, 22, 23. It's not a solid 24 FPS. If I turn the proxy rig on, I'm averaging way over. Now it's maxing at 24, but this is showing me how high I can go. So I easily, just by turning on my proxy rig, gained an average of 4 to 5 frames per second, and I'm not even losing the facial controls.
Yeah.
But the
I'm gonna write this so that you do an actual demo because I want this.
Yeah. And the main reason I use proxy rigs isn't so much for the speed, because most of the time I can get what I need, but it's to turn off things. I don't like having things when I'm not animating them. So this is why I have it, so I can just do this. And here I'm getting 28 frames per second, 34, 29, like way above 24 frames per second, which is my max. And I still have a facial control. And it is so nice. And then I can just flip it back to real time. Boom, 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 boom. Way better than those crappy proxy rigs where the face isn't there. But
yeah,
I'll have to show you guys how to do that, because to be honest, it takes maybe, I'd say with my, now that I've done it enough, maybe takes me 20 minutes to set up. But it's super simple. You're literally just duplicating the mesh, making it low poly, deleting high deformation areas like shoulders, elbows, where there's a lot of deformations, wrap deforming it to the regular geo and hiding the regular geo, and then going through a process of set driven keys to be able to have just one main menu here that hides and unhides different things. So literally what it's doing in the background is it's just literally controlling control H, or hiding the things that you don't want to see, and it's all through this simple hub here. But in theory, it's just a wrap deformed low mesh, which is just going to mesh display and harden edges, because softening edges makes it look smooth. And then just deleting all these high deformation areas. And then separating the mesh so that you can turn different parts off. So I'll do a demo on that at some point in the future when I have time.
Yay.
But it's super nice. But
I'm booking a lot of demos for you.
bake it to a cube.
Yeah.
Proxy rig.
Yeah, you also wanted to do one on how to be faster animating. I think it also has to do with baking
to a cube and the layered workflow and all the different things that I do. So
yeah.
Cool. But with that, if there's no other questions or anything like that, I think we can call it. It's been a super fun Saturday stream, just chatting about things we like to do when we animate.
Yeah, thank you everyone you guys who came to hear us talk about Animbot.
Exactly. And listening to my rant about baking to cubes.
Look, I'm sure a lot of people learned a lot, not just about Animbot, but about the cubes.
Exactly. So, all right, guys, if that's all the questions and everything, we'll stop it here. Thank you guys for coming, and I'll see you guys next week.
Yeah.